Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. What I'm doing here is using the same app that I've always used to record voice, but this time I'm using it on the new phone. This is a backup phone I've had for a while, and until I get the case replaced on my principal phone, I just went ahead and swap my SIM cards to this one. Maybe it'll work. If the audio was choppy, please tell me. Now that Hannah Davis, as her mom calls her, I don't know if that's her middle name or her first name, but she goes by Pearl Davis, ironically a very ethnic name that sounds like an elder church usher at the New Greater Zion Valley. Precious Lamb, O Lord, hold my mule while I shout. Golden Cross, Trinity Monument, Mount of Hope, Faith Tabernacle, Holy Bright Morning Star, Evangelistic Apostolic Church of God Incorporated, pastored by the Reverend Alizé O'Grady, with pork chop sideburns and a jerry curl, and a fondness for chitlins in backwoods Mississippi. It is actually used by her, but whether she's Pearl Davis or Hannah Davis, the real reason that we're arguing is not a bad reason. The subject of the argument is bad, but the reason that we're at least paying attention is not bad. I think it's wrong for us to argue, but we're paying attention. And we're talking about something that is subconscious, which is why many of us are having a hard time articulating. And as we try to put what we know into words, we wind up going to extremes. It happens a lot. See, I teach language, and I teach my own native language, which means that I have to come to be able to articulate things that we subconsciously know but can't explain in many cases. I've got to learn to explain what people have a hard time explaining. Not only from teaching history, but then from teaching language and my native language at that, which means I've learned some rules, but not all. I've learned rules and forgotten them, and I've had to relearn them with different vocabulary to explain them so I can tell my students. To give an example, present perfect. Subject, have or has, and then the past participle form of a verb. Have you spoken to them? No, they have forgotten every time we make an appointment. You see, that's the past. That's the present perfect, using the past participle. Now, if somebody has a language in which the past tense is only one past tense, direct preterite, or past simple, they would say, did you speak to them? And the answer would be no. They forgot every single time we made an appointment. Oh. How do you explain the present perfect to them? Well, then you've got to say, all right, check this out. Using have or has or had in front of nouns is a possessive. Using have or had or has in front of a past participle verb is like, it's similar to a possessive, but it's a possessive specifically for experience without specifying exactly when in the past this was. That's what it is. It's like a possessive for past experience, but without specifying the time in the past. Then you practice examples with them and they get it. I know, I just did it. And I'm watching as my people are trying to articulate things that we subconsciously know and take for granted but have never had to fully explain before. So I'm going to help you out so that we can cease arguing and we can then pay attention to that which is really noteworthy to observe, because it is a pattern that is going to repeat itself again and again. Pearl, Hannah, took accountability, and you can give her due credit for taking accountability while still holding her feet to the fire for trying to diminutize slavery, even if she meant it in a different context from how she described it, because that's on her for not describing it that well. She's admitted to not being that bright. So yeah, there are times she really is ditzy when it comes to explaining things. And she can be ditzy and then turn around and play ditzier to get out of accountability for things she was still smart enough to know not to try to tackle on her own without getting expertise and help. You see how this nuance is killing you? Sounds like I'm straddling a fence when in fact what I'm saying is I'm not straddling a fence of going back and forth between condemning her and supporting her, but rather I'm saying that the middle of the road was really to just dismiss her unless you're going to observe a particular pattern we need to observe because it's going to repeat itself again and again. And what is that pattern? Now I'm going to go ahead and get to the meat of this. It's very simple. White supremacy is a religion that transcends race, even though it's obsessed with racial inequality. My religion transcends race, and this is part of why I'm standing with the other Muslims that are manosphere or manosphere adjacent that are black. The features, Crimson Cure, Abul Bara Muhammad Amariki. When it comes down to this, I'm standing with them. This is part of why it is I can say that Daniel Akikachu has a racial bias. I can say this. It's not that he doesn't have to hate us. That's not required. See, white supremacy, in order for it to be a religion, with people not knowing that it is a religion, means that it must be subconscious. And it is not only subconsciously a lot of white folks' religion and a lot of non-black folks' religion, it is subconsciously many black folks' religion. We're just the race that is making sure to divide ourselves between who follows it and who becomes conscious of it and then refuses to follow it. We're divided in that regard, which is a good thing. Other races are not. Their youth are beginning to divide themselves like that, and hats off to them. Ruba Zaman is one example. He's like, no, you don't disrespect. Now, Ruba Zaman may or may not know that this was subconscious, and this is what I want y'all to understand. It's no use arguing about Pearl. Just pay attention so that you can understand how subconscious bias works. That's what I'm trying to get y'all to understand. That's what's important to pay attention to. Subconscious bias is real. It's not a joke. It's there. How does it play out? Like this. People who do not hate black folks, who are not angry with black folks, who may like black folks, can still have biases against black folks or just biases in favor of their own, even when their people are the oppressors. It manifests in the form of heroicizing oppressors. That's what we need to pay attention to. White supremacy does not demand that Pearl hate us, be angry with us. It doesn't even require Pearl to be aware of any biases against us. White supremacy does not even require us to be aware of biases against ourselves. It is a religion that does not even depend on the existence of white people anymore. It's still white supremacy. It masquerades as normality. It becomes a default. It has become a default. It's a default software setting for a lot of people, to the point that some folks think that it's a natural human instinct and therefore white folks are supreme for real, and then they become conscious white supremacists. Nick Fuentes knows of his bias. He calls it racial realism. He believes that that's really what it is. He didn't think very deeply, but he did think somewhat deeply and then got tired of it and jumped to this conclusion. Everybody knows that N-words are inferior. Can't you tell? Pearl's thought about it a bit more deeply, but she hasn't fully confronted this because you don't have to when you are a young, wealthy, Western European, white American woman. It's not required to confront that, think that deeply. Her experience with bias has come in the form of not being able to find an equally wealthy Wyatt husband because Wyatt men, especially wealthy Wyatt men, have their own preferences. She doesn't meet them. But she's still a family woman. She still loves her sisters, dad. Dad loves her. And with the money, dad backed her up. And that's how she got to where she is. She didn't really start off needing us that much. It helped, but she didn't really start off needing. When I say us, I don't mean the black manosphere. I mean just black people. It helped, but she didn't really need us that much. She had money. But to maximize what her father gave her, it was still more beneficial to deal with us as an audience and then still be careless about certain things, which she was. She didn't have to interview Nick Fuentes out of malice. That was careless. Stupid. Yeah, of course it was, but it was careless. It didn't have to be malicious. It never does. What we're really seeing and why we're really arguing is because we're having a hard time articulating that which we subconsciously know. White supremacy, racial bias is not always, matter of fact, a lot of times it's not conscious, it is subconscious. And it plays out. And oftentimes people like us who have to be aware of other people's subconscious biases without knowing to call it subconscious biases can see it, but we don't know how to describe it. It is a bias that is devoid of malice or hatred or even awareness on her part. She doesn't have to mean any harm. Most don't. It's still there because it's in the training. It's in presuppositions that many people have had to make in life. That's all. Nothing else. We're just having a hard time articulating it, so we're falling on opposite sides or opposite extremes of an argument instead of saying, let's just sit back and watch, understand that there's such a thing as subconscious bias. Let's watch how it plays out in her as an example so that we get more familiar with the pattern of what we're dealing with and know how to move forward in the future with less fighting and arguments between ourselves. Because some of us, when you don't understand that white supremacy is a religion, and it is oftentimes at the subconscious level, and it is a international religion, and it transcends race despite being obsessed with a racial hierarchy, then you don't fully know how to define racism, therefore a racist. And that's what we're arguing about. Well, what is the threshold? Where exactly does the definition of a racist begin? I'm telling you that the fine line over which to debate but not argue is how aware someone is of it. That's what this is about. I hope that what I've said has been a benefit. Thank you for listening. As always, black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual, non-select male power, and black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. Thank you again for flying with me on Jet Black Airways, where jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with me till the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender and racial justice now and forever.